Welcome back, everybody, to another installment in our look at Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. And man, this week was incredible. And as always, we have Tom here to talk about it with me. So what's
Hello.
going on, Tom? How you doing?
I am good. I am absolutely hyped after this episode. As you can see, I got a t-shirt, so for our last two episodes, I can actually be repping Monarch.
Yeah, dude.
I am just like so absolutely enthralled with this show and how much the creators of it have really managed to tell a complicated story and then stick the landing. It's just insane.
It is so good, and I'm getting so hyped each week, and I'm also getting so mad. And I'm wondering out loud to myself every time. I'm like, who in the hell is Tom's source? Who is
Right,
revealing all of this information to Tom? That
I will come clear to you, okay? I had seen one of the later trailers that had some shots in, so I didn't want to reference on any of our past shows to avoid spoiling it for you. But
Sure.
there was a shot in one of those trailers that was just Shaw stood in front of the
The
ball from this
hourglass.
episode.
Okay.
And since I saw that, I was like, that's got to be a thing that they use to go to the Hollow Earth, surely.
Okay.
Now, actually, I was wrong because they don't use it to go to the Hollow Earth. And I don't know if you have picked that up. So if not, I'll explain something later that Dangerville's been sharing a lot online. So shout out to Alistair because he does some fantastic Godzilla content. But he shared some stuff to clarify some of the stuff in this episode as well.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah, you'll have to share it as we go along because
Yeah.
don't know what you're talking about, and I'm interested to hear. So, but yeah, man, this is a straight fire episode. It was just awesome the whole way through. I remember once the title sequence dropped, I was like, oh my god, what an intro! Like that whole intro sequence was just so good. And then like even to the final moments of this episode, again, just mind-blowing stuff. I'm like, whoa, I can't believe you're doing this. This is awesome. And there's in every one of these episodes, there's emotion, there's great storytelling, there's great visuals, and
Dude, the emotion in
dots
this
being
was
connected.
up to 11.
Oh my god, yeah, you're right. It was just like, yes, it was just 11 the whole time. I felt like, like from moment one all the way to the end. It's just like completely emotional, and that's all through the storytelling that they're doing, and making us love these characters and their arcs and their connections. Like it's just doing it so brilliantly, and I really love that. I've watched a lot of great shows, in over the course of like 2023 and obviously before that too, but this one is standing out as like just having such great connections, and I really love that for it. I love how it's just building the world so well. It's standing up there, I think, with some of the best shows that I've seen recently.
I honestly, I think it's been handled so well. Like, just so many of, especially in this episode, actually, the emotional beats. There's one thing where I'll talk about it later, and I feel like the writing kind of deviates from where we're at with a certain character. But apart from that, I think the majority of this is really building on things really well, and it's kind of it's getting to the crux of sort of what you want to know about this universe, but it's doing it in a way that's very character driven. And I think obviously for some fans of the Monsterverse who are more into the Titans and everything, that's not necessarily what they've been looking for with this show. But if you take this show as a piece of drama that is set within the Monsterverse, then it really does have all of those sort of emotive character beats and those sort of interconnected relationships that have made that are now starting to show fruition, right? And you get into the point where you're starting to see the payoff for those relationships, and you're starting to get some really, really interesting dynamics emerging as well. I will say, just before we go any further as well, I did manage to predict the ending for this episode without seeing that in a trailer, because they definitely did not reveal that in a trailer.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine they did. I did not predict that part of the ending, but the other part right before that, I had predicted that would happen right at the end there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was kind of like just, like as the actual ending was playing out, I was like, wait, what? Who's? Oh my god! Like, it was just
Yeah.
like such a cool reveal. That was great. Um, let's see. Anything else before we get started? Oh, I wanted to make mention before we get started. I thought this was quite hilarious. The other day, um, I put on Godzilla versus Kong, and my son has
Yeah.
been like obsessed with it over the past, 2 weeks or so. I feel like he he came downstairs and I was watching the movie, like, and it was like after school or something. So I paused it, and he's like, "What's that?" So we started watching a little bit of it.
Yeah.
So he was like into it right away. And then the other day, he like watched episode 8 with me, and he was like, "This is awesome." He was like getting into it. And then last night, he was like, he's like, "Can you wait for me to? Can you watch that with me? The next episode?"
Oh,
I was like, "Yeah, yeah, man, I'll watch it with you. I mean, you'll probably watch it. I'll watch it like the second time with you." And then again, going back to what I was initially bringing up, we were watching Godzilla versus Kong, and uh, I don't remember the character's name, but Brian Tyree Henry, his
yeah.
podcast. He was doing his podcast
Yeah.
in the very beginning of that movie, and all you hear is his voice. And we're sitting there on the couch, the whole family's there, and we're watching the beginning of this movie. And my daughter, she's only 3, and and she hears this voice, and I poke fun because like she always says to me, because I'll put podcasts on, and she's like, "I don't like podcasts. I don't like listening to podcasts." So she's cracking up about that. But at the same time, she's cracking up about the podcast aspect of it. She also says, "Dad, is that Miles Morales' dad?" And I'm like, "What?" And then I'm like, "I don't what? No, it's this guy from the movie." And then my wife, looked it up, and Brian Tyree Henry actually plays Miles Morales' dad
What?
in Into the Spider-Verse, and my mind was blown. I was like, "How did you know that? Like, how did you get that from this 2-second clip of like him talking, you know, doing this podcast, and this he's like down here, kind of like conspiracy theory talking down here." And I'm like, "How did you connect those dots in your mind, your 3-year-old little brain, that is Miles Morales' dad?" I was like, my mind was blown. So I thought that was really funny.
You've got some
Um,
well-cultured kids there who are clearly used to podcasts being just a part of the environment, you know?
and hearing those voices, recognizing like I was just blown away. I thought that was really cool. So yeah, we've watched Godzilla versus Kong like 2 or 3 times over the past week or so. And I'm digging it a lot more. I feel like I was not cold, but I was like a little cool on that movie, I guess. But
Yeah.
um, I feel like it is a little fractured here and there. There's a little bit of rough storytelling, but I do think connecting dots with the show. This show I feel like is kind of acting like the Clone Wars for like the prequels, of Star Wars. That it's like filling in some gaps and making some of that storytelling even better, and I appreciate that. So it's
Yeah.
been cool to kind of revisit that movie a little bit. But we're gonna talk about episode 9 right now. What was the title? Do you have the title of episode 9?
So the title of episode 9 is Axis Mundi.
Okay. Uh, I don't get it, but maybe there's some connection there. I didn't research it, so who knows? But
So it's
this
Latin for it's like the circumference in the middle of the earth, essentially.
there we go. Okay, yeah, and that's the access point, right? So that's what we're talking about. All right, so we start off in the past, and we've got like a kind of like a somber tone. I feel like it starts off
Yeah.
with Bill and Shaw uh, talking to Hiroshi, and he calls him Uncle Lee. And at this point, I'm like, because they didn't give us the title or like where they are or anything or what time period
Yeah.
it is until later. Um, and I was like, oh man, like is Keiko gone? Like at this point, is she gone? I'm like, oh, she's probably, this is probably after that scene that we saw at the beginning of the series. And Lee has to talk about some important stuff with Hiroshi about like, I'm gonna be doing some top secret explorer stuff. And he gives him the pocket knife.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, is this for shaving pencils? This-
It is. Were you
I
waiting for
can't get the
that scene
pencil
of it
shavings
to,
out of
like,
my head.
zoom out on young Hiroshi, and as it's zooming out, there's just pencil shavings on the floor where he's been using his new pocket knife.
I couldn't help but like just laugh about these pencil shavings over and over. At first I was like, is he gonna pull out a handful of pencil shavings to him? But no, it was the pocket knife. It had some words on the back. I don't know what it said, but I thought it was a very cool looking pocket knife at least. So, but we do
Yeah.
find out that it is the Monarch test site in Kansas,
Yes.
1962. So we're at a brand new time period here, new place, new facility. And they basically are like, well, it's a shame that she couldn't see this, and then I'm like, okay, all right, she's definitely at this point dead and gone. Whatever happened, in that intro sequence or whatever, wherever that took place.
Yeah.
Military's all over, so I'm like, okay, I guess they're good with the government. I guess that the deal that they worked out in the last episode, everything's going good. And then I'm like, are you kidding me? Here's the old tech that Tom had talked about that's gonna get him to the center of the earth, and I'm like,
Oh, wait, so I
this
did mention
guy.
it before. Okay.
You did. Yeah, you had said, I think in the
Yeah.
last episode, you're like, I think like, he probably used some old tech to get to this, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, what old tech? Are they, what are they gonna do to
Yeah.
get to? Come on, like so. And I think prior to this episode, I had mostly, I feel like, a lot of questions about the reality of going to the hollow earth, and because
Yes.
we hear it in Godzilla versus Kong that the Lynn's brother got like torn up or whatever trying to get down there. And so I'm thinking about the plausibility of how are they realistically going to get down there and make
Mm,
this work in a believable way. And I
yeah.
thought, whoa, they actually did it. Like they really did. I don't know, what was it? At what point was it? Um,
Are you thinking about
oh,
what Pocket says? Or it's
yeah.
not
Oh,
Pocket.
so yeah, I was just wondering at what point that was said. So yeah, it was right around here though that Puckett is basically like, yeah, Dr. Suzuki found a way in, and the only way in is basically through a Titan. And
Yeah.
we're gonna like, you know, just drift behind them in their wake, and that's it, and it's all good. And I was like, oh my god, like brilliant, like they did
Yeah.
they
It's such a
resolved.
smart way of resolving it.
Yeah, they resolved it, and I'm like, that is great. Like they don't need some high tech heave to get them to center. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, this works. Like this is cool. This
There
I
is
believe
also
this.
there's something else here, and this is something that so Dangerville's whole theory is that this isn't the axis, this isn't the Hollow Earth, and that this is a midway point between the Hollow Earth and our Earth, called
Mm.
Axis Mundi, which makes sense because Axis Mundi is the middle point in Latin, and you do see in the actual environment that they're in these kind of like streams in the atmosphere that are constantly in two different colors, so there's constantly two different forces present. So I think that does make sense to some extent. It's never really explicitly said, it's just communicated later in the episode that it's a part of the Titans realm, and that's it. It's no more further than that. It could equally be that Monarch is referring to this as Axis Mundi right now because the Hollow Earth is a name that comes later. So I am not
Yeah.
convinced either way. I think it could be this other realm, or it could be the Hollow Earth as we know it. But I think the idea of it being another realm adds kind of credence to that explanation as well, doesn't it? Of actually, okay, they're not going as far as the Hollow Earth, they're going to this middle point, and therefore they're not actually suffering their injuries. Um,
Yeah.
but there is, jumping ahead a little bit to how it all plays out with Operation Hourglass. I do think there's something in the way it's portrayed here of this like massive gravitational well essentially developing straight after they go through, and I'm wondering if that is what had happened to remind me of his name, the
Oh,
scientist.
Dr. Lind or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. So I wonder if Dr. Lynn's brother was caught in that kind of gravitational well, because that looks like the kind of thing that you wouldn't survive if you weren't in some kind of mechanism. So that sort of, to me at least,
Mhm.
seemed like a physical representation of actually what would cause that injury to somebody.
Maybe, but I think it probably just has to do with the Titan themselves because
Yeah.
maybe despite all of these people, these military people being there, maybe that information didn't get out, to the rest of the world that like you need a Titan to get through. Because Shaw's fine, Kate's fine, May is fine.
Yeah.
Spoilers. They made it through with no device at all. They just
No,
were
so I
in the wake.
I have a theory about that as well, which is you see that after, so obviously that Shaw goes through, right? And then there's like a moment where it pauses, and then after that the gravitational well starts. Is it not possible that the explosives that Shaw set off disrupted that happening? So the thing that would have killed them when they fell through therefore never happened because of the explosions.
I don't know, man. It's possible, I guess.
Are
I
we
have
going too deep already, Red?
yeah, no, I mean, like, look, there was a lot of chaos there at that moment in time, but, I don't know that time moved enough for us to even know, because all we saw was that explosion, it caved in, and then we did get a little bit of Tim getting dragged away, but at what point was that? I don't know.
Yeah.
So who knows? Like there could have been some chaos, but I think you're right. I think there was probably no chaos in that room at least because it was sealed. So there was no, I don't know, no magnetic pull going on. So maybe you're right. Maybe that does have something to do with it. Um, I don't
I
know.
think
I
either
don't know.
way, it's really cool that they didn't just leave it up in the air. They actually explain it, and I think
Yeah.
that I here immediately, I was kind of like, do you know what? It's really awesome that they actually have taken the time to do that because a lot of shows would just show you it and ask you to suspend disbelief, but this at
Yeah.
least gives you some sort of understanding of it. There's one other thing during this whole sequence that I think is interesting as well, and I've made a note of it because I think it's going to come back at some point, which is the names of the other people who Shaw went through with. So you have
Mhm.
Shaw, and then you have Brandt, you have Hest, and you have Burke. Now
Yeah.
Burke could be a little Jurassic Park reference for right? It could be a
I know. I
reference
was just
to
thinking that.
which is cool. But I wouldn't be surprised if these are characters who pop up at some point in the future, perhaps in other media, perhaps referenced in the films. I just found it interesting because I did a little search on the Godzilla Wikipedia afterwards, and they're not named anywhere on there at the moment, but it does make time to specifically show you the names on the helmet, so I wouldn't be surprised if that pops
Mhm.
up again somewhere in the future.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because later on when we do learn, what happened, that they crash landed and everything, he says like I don't think I wrote down the name, but he says like Ben didn't make it or something.
Yeah,
And I was like, okay, well that wasn't the name that we had on the helmets, so who is this person? I'm not
yeah.
sure which one of
I
these
think they
people
showed
they are.
Brandt's helmet on like a fork at that time, so I think it was
Oh
Brandt's
yeah.
to
Okay,
away.
okay. Is that what they did? All right.
Yeah.
I forgot, yeah. So, but yeah, let's get back to it. So we are
Can I just give you one more? This is
oh,
like super
go
going
ahead.
fully into like the film critic analysis level
Oh,
now, but this is
okay.
like an interesting parallel here as well. Is can we just appreciate that the portal that they choose to go through is in Kansas? So there's the whole nod there to obviously Dorothy's story with the Wicked Witch of the West and ending up in another world. And I just think that's a really, really cool media parallel that's here as well.
Hey man, I didn't even put those 2 together, but you're right, and it does create a tornado
Yeah.
after the fact, like that is pretty brilliant actually. I like that, man. I like that. Um, and you had mentioned, if this is some sort of waypoint between the worlds. I don't know that I believe that per se. Maybe it is. I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, there is no like. I don't feel concrete about either of this. But if I'm gonna settle with a side, I feel like I'm gonna say just no because um, we get Titans in there. There's plenty of Titans, to be seen,
Yeah.
and I think visually, maybe they just didn't want to go all out like they do in Godzilla versus Kong and the upcoming movie. Maybe that was their way of like saving a little bit of budget. So
Yeah.
because like it was a very simplified version of what if it is the Hollow Earth, it was kind of
Yeah.
simplified, right? It was just
I
very
I
straight
don't
up
even know.
trees and
I kind of, but it had like a lot of the sort of like a distortion that you see in the Hollow Earth in the background, and they had that whole electric storm as well, and that can't have been particularly cheap to edit.
no, but I don't know. What is easier? Is that easier or is, creating a massive two-sided valley that, is
Yeah, I think I know
has
the answer here.
pteranodons flying around like so I don't know. But what they did create visually looked really cool and really interesting and it did like have like a very dreamlike state. So it very
Yeah,
well could be some sort of in between. So that yeah, who knows? I don't really feel concrete about my answer either, but I do think like if I'm just gonna settle on one, I'm just gonna say it's a Hollow Earth just because that saying it's not adds another layer to the story that I don't know
I
if we
agree.
exactly need. Like I don't know if we
Yeah, I
need
think that's a really
this
fair
middle
point.
ground. We've already got a tunnel to the to the Hollow Earth. Like that's enough for me.
Yeah. I mean, the
um,
idea that, like, there's quite an interesting idea, isn't there? That actually, at this point in time, they think that they need the Titans to enter the Hollow Earth, and then
mhm.
somewhere down the line, they realize that actually they can create vehicles that are able to stop that. And actually, it is all to do with that gravitational force, because the exact design of the heave is to put gravitational force back out, so it kind of counterbalances it. So
Mhm.
that kind of makes sense in a way.
Yeah. Um, there was something else. Oh, we'll talk about it in a little bit. I was going to mention. So, all right. So anyway, they kick off Operation Hourglass. They want to plant their flag in underspace. I thought that was a silly line. It just sounded so silly coming out of the General Puckett. I'm like, it just sounded like it just sounded like underwear to me, but it was funny. But I love that they were, using that machine that Dr. Suzuki had created to
Yeah.
bait the
And that
Titans.
Suzuki was there
Really
as well,
cool.
because it makes
Yeah.
sense for Monarch to hire him, doesn't it?
Yeah, he looked kinda terrified too when stuff started going down. I was like, "Oh,"
Yeah.
and then they're, like, camping out in the RV. I thought that was funny. But the pod's going wild as they're rifting through the earth. Tornado starts, and Lee mentions that the hourglass is imploding on them, and then it kinda cuts out. And at that point, the general's, like, very confused, and, I'm like, "Oh, he is kinda human because he seems, like, genuinely concerned,
Yeah.
about, what just happened, and Bill at that point returns to Hiroshi, and then we get just the title sequence. So I thought, man, that was just such a killer intro to this episode. Wow, it was like
It was there's
just
a
full blast.
Yeah, and there's another really interesting parallel in terms of the fact that the Titan that they followed in was the Iron Bat from the Lawton. That, like, I saw somebody say it doesn't look like the same one, but I'm fairly sure
Hmm.
it's meant to be the same
It did
creature.
look,
So
yeah, I thought so too.
it's interesting that the first Titan that Monarch encounters is also the Titan that, as we'll talk about, leads to Monarch being shut down. There's like that interesting parallel there as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So we end up after the title sequence getting back to Kentaro's story. He's at a hospital in Tokyo. He's airlifted out
Yeah.
of Kazakhstan. Um, and we do get a little shot of Tim getting dragged to safety and like I guess
By
a small little
Duvall.
flashback. What's that? Yeah, by Duvall.
By
Um,
Duvall, which is interesting in itself because, like, obviously she's left without Shaw now. So what's she gonna do while Shaw's in this other world as well?
yeah, I mean, she still wants to, fight for humanity and save people. She wants to do the right thing. So it'll be interesting to see where she aligns here. But yeah, Tim's okay. He didn't emerge from any bug skeletons or anything like that, unfortunately. So, um, but uh, they do mention to Kentaro that like Shaw, May, and Kate didn't make it out safely, and
Yeah,
Lee Shaw died doing what he loved. And I
yeah,
like this. I was
pouring
like,
gas
okay.
on fires he doesn't understand. Yeah.
Yeah. And I did like this line from Verdugo, but I thought it was like, I was like, man, this is harsh. But she's just like, your time in our world has come to an end.
Yeah, I
And
wrote
and
that line
yeah,
down as well.
and he's basically like, what am I supposed to do? And she's like, live. It was like very dramatic and stuff. So,
Yeah,
um, but and then the curtain reveals his mom is standing there. So,
yeah,
nice little scene. Nothing too crazy going on here, but they believe that everybody died. That's their
yeah.
belief, right? So, um, yeah. So
It's
they're moving on.
the thing that blew my mind with this as well, right, is that Monarch have had access to that technology since the 80s, but they just don't know it worked. So Verdugo is assuming that well, they do know it worked. And I think this is the thing that
Yeah.
blew my mind actually, is they do know it worked because Shaw comes back. So Verdugo knows that there's a chance that those kids are still alive, but she's like, no, absolutely not. They're dead, and that's it. And I find that
Yeah.
so interesting because you can see her write it off, but you can see that Tim isn't so sure again. And it again comes back to that center pillar of this show, which is actually having this character leading Monarch who is so by the book that she won't think of any other possibilities. But you can tell that Tim is like, well, actually, Shaw came back.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing I really need from this show is just explaining to me exactly why Monarch is so complicit in
Mm,
not doing anything and not, acting and not really using the information they have and because this all existed. Like everything there was connections between Monarch and the military. They back in the 60s knew about like how to get to the center and how to, and then later on they find out that it worked and it's like, okay, so where is all this information going? And by the
yeah,
time the later on rolls around, they're like, "Oh, this is all crazy talk. Like none of this is real." And I'm like, "Whoa, like how do we get there?" Like that I kind of need a little bit of that, like to tell me
yeah.
I guess what's going on there. But outside of that, I feel like this show has answered and delivered on so many things. So
It's honestly been
yeah,
incredible, the amount
yeah.
it's connected. Um,
Um, you have anything else for that section there?
I mean, the only thing I had written is right at the end here, I scribbled down falling in with a Titan. Did that let them survive? And then we cut to our next shot, which immediately answered my brain process.
Yeah.
I did
So
one little thing here as we transition to this actually. I love the use of the dip to black to make it literally feel like you're going into something else entirely.
yeah, that was pretty cool. And at that point, they do wake up, or Lee actually awakens, and I felt bad for May at this point because he's only yelling for Kate. He's just
Yeah,
he doesn't care where May is. He's just like, Kate, where are you? He's like constantly screaming for her. And this is, I took a note that like, yeah, this was very cool visually. I thought it looked really cool with
yes.
the soft lighting, or just the soft palette
Yeah.
overall. I thought it looked really cool. But then there's like this rift lighting, which I don't know if that's what it was, but that's what it
Yeah, like
looked like. Just like
streams of energy in the background.
yeah, it just whether it was like, the, what do you call those lights, in the sky?
Aurora
Uh,
Borealis.
yeah, it kinda looked like that,
Yeah,
just, like, in the background of the entire sequence, and it was very dark too, it was a mostly
yeah,
dark sequence, but these very straight up tall trees, and so it did feel like a kind of, like, different state, I guess, a little bit
yeah.
different than what we've seen, at least from the Hollow Earth, but just beautiful. And he ends up finding May, and they start to run because lightning is coming from the ground. I thought that was like so cool. Just like,
It was
uh,
like the way it worked as well. The sequence was so
mhm.
cool.
Yeah, just spidering through the ground and then connecting in one charge and blasting upwards. I was
I
like,
had
man, this
thought
is a
about
way. What's that?
go on. Don't let me
No,
cut you off.
I was just gonna say, like, that is a way to say, like, you're not in Kansas anymore, you know?
Yes. Um,
It's
um,
exactly like because it could be. It feels like it could be just a familiar location. You're like, oh, just like a
yeah,
normal forest, but like, it's brewing from the ground and exploding
yeah,
upwards. Like, it's just a great way to identify you are not in Kansas. You're in a completely different place. I know they
yeah.
didn't come from Kansas; they were in Kazakhstan, but the
It's all
analogy still applies.
something I hadn't thought of before actually, but and that this is me again looking for parallels. You know, since parallels and interiors, it's all I can think about.
Yeah.
But there's a really cool thing that the MonsterVerse has done that I think Stranger Things also did as well, which is making its other world feel familiar but different. So in this
Mm.
case, you have this environment that feels very much like a petrified rainforest in a sense, or a petrified forest. But then, like you say, the electricity, the bugs you get that look very, very different to anything else just helps to make
Yeah.
it feel a lot more alien. And I really like that because it's exactly what Stranger Things did as well with the Upside Down, where you have like the same environment but a different color palette. It just
Hmm.
works so well, and it makes it feel more unnerving because it's a location that feels familiar but also alien.
I did think at one point I was like, "Oh, they're kind of calling back to Stranger Things." I did think that
Yeah,
because I was like, I even said at one point when they, I forget which point I said it, but like I was like, "Oh, they're in the Upside Down now." Like, and
yeah,
I was like, I actually like stumbled. I was like, "Oh, it's the Hollow Earth. It's not the Upside Down." I was like, "Okay," but it just looked visually kind of like it, and in a way, it is kind of like that because they're going to a different dimension basically. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, and it is definitely
yeah,
calling back to that, I feel like. Um, but yeah, I think Lee mentions at some point that, once a rift closes, it has a lot of effects and stuff,
yeah,
and it creates a static shock, electricity and stuff like that. Then they go off looking for Kate. Um, so yeah, that was a cool sequence. But then we cut to the past.
yes,
And Bill is called to General Puckett, and
mm,
this is where we learned that Monarch is maybe officially getting cut off for good this time. It's
yeah,
over. They're not allocating any more funds, despite everything they know about this. Like they have to know about Godzilla now, and they have to know about all of the Titans and these portals. I get so they know a lot of information, but they're still at the same time like and General Puckett makes a conversation point about this, but like they know about space. They understand
yeah,
space, but they don't understand these portals and these monsters and things like that. So, but they both are blaming themselves. Bill and Puckett. They're both saying this was their faults. And I was happy to see, I guess, that General Puckett was actually upset at the loss of
yeah.
one of his peers
Well,
and
he's
Lee
probably
and
his friend.
mostly. Yeah, his friend, yeah.
Yeah,
And I liked that he was fighting for Hiroshi at this point. He's basically like, "Look,
yeah,
Bill, you need to reel it in and do not take his father away too." That's what he said. I thought that
yeah.
was a great line, and it gave Bill something to think about, but at the same time, we know that Bill did not really take it too seriously because he did go
Yeah,
down that road. So,
it's really interesting because this perfectly sets up his character arc in Kong Skull Island, though, because we know in Kong Skull Island he's saying if I could just get this one on film, that's all it would take. So at this point, you kind of see this crossroads where Monarch has lost its funding. And what do we see in the prior episodes? The thing that persuades Puckett to come back to them is evidence. So actually seeing the monsters. So at this point, you can tell that
yeah,
Bill's thinking, if I can just give these people evidence that
yeah,
there's something else out there, they're gonna fund us again. So he's going back to what he knows has already worked, and that's why he goes to Skull Island. So you get this natural full circle character arc for this character. But what I also really like is the fact that he has the line where he says, we could bring a Titan up and show them real catastrophe. So you can
oh yeah.
actually see this kind of darker side to Bill as well, dealing with this loss, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I was
Can
I
we?
was thinking
Can
about
we
some of the villains that we've gotten over this series,
yeah,
and like they're the ones who always want to bring the monsters out and attack or do something.
yeah.
So it kind of like it was that darker side for a second. Yeah.
I think, and we'll talk about this more later, but there's a massive element of tragedy to Bill's character as well in terms of how that all plays out.
Yeah, yeah. I think a rewatch of Kong is next on the list just to because like I've kind of wanted to get to this point where I understand his character. And now I feel like I'm there. Like I feel like I've gotten
Yeah,
there. So now I want to connect those dots even further. So I think it's time to give that another look. So yeah, and you're right. Like everything is connecting so well, and I love that it gives reasoning for everybody's actions. It is just it's
yeah,
brilliant. Again, connecting dots you didn't necessarily know you wanted or needed or even knew about, and it's brilliant. It's great.
yeah.
Um, and this next sequence we cut to Lee recovering in quarantine, and
Yeah.
of course I'm like, oh, well, we're in the past, but this is different. This is a different time.
I've got to hit you with one more parallel, Brad, straight away.
All right.
Major vibes for this with the way they showed like this technologically advanced dome that he's
Mhm.
held in. Instantly, I'm thinking, wow, this is Captain America, the first Avenger, when he wakes up in New York.
Yeah, yep. I know. And I was thinking that as well. And yeah, obviously he did play what is his name? Agent something? Well,
Yes,
I forget what he's called.
he
Uh
was John Walker,
John Walker,
US
yeah.
agent.
US
Yeah,
agent. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I thought the same thing. It was just a cool parallel. And I liked watching his character wake up and not really know what's going on, and people are
yeah,
questioning him. And at the same time, I don't really know what's going on because like I know we're in a different time period because he's back,
yeah,
like he's back from the past. And but I couldn't grasp whether these people knew of him. Did they know who he was? Like what they're asking him questions like, so I wasn't really sure. And then he's obviously like, "Get me Bill Randa." He's freaking out about
yeah,
it. And we find out that it's Christmas time, and I'm like, this episode came like a week or two a little late. Why didn't I not start this series a few weeks earlier?
yeah.
um, but he ends up taking a nurse hostage and screaming, again, "Get me Bill Randa." And oh, dude, so great, so great. But as he's like holding her hostage, he looks into another room and you see like a spaceship launching of like a more
Yeah.
modern day spaceship. And like that's the Captain America of it all. It's like, he's like, what is happening? Like he sees things going on that is not relative to his time. So that to me was the perfect like
Yeah.
comparison there. And in my mind, I'm like, what time period is this? Is it the 90s? Like where are we?
Well, it
Um,
instantly frames it, doesn't it? Because
yeah.
Puckett says, "Oh, we're 20 years off being able to do that successfully," when he's talking about the space launch at the start of the episode.
Oh, did he say that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
All right. So so I don't know how at some point we do find out that we're at a Monarch medical facility. So like they should know at least what's going on. And it is 1982. Um and dude, we get Hiroshi and I'm like, "Whoa." And he says Uncle Lee and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is brilliant." And I'm also wondering like are we getting a lot of de-aging going on here? Is that's what's happening? Because like we haven't really seen Hiroshi all that much. We've seen like flashes of him, and like I don't feel like we've spent enough time with him for me to recognize whether like they just did a quick makeup job on him or shaved his beard. But he fully to me looked like fully de-aged. Like they cleaned him up a little
yeah,
bit, and he looked definitely younger. Because we're oh my god, 30 years off. No, 40 almost.
I think
Almost.
yeah,
No, maybe not that long. 30 something.
it's
Um
72, so it would be 30 something. Yeah,
yeah. Um oh no, I guess 40 straight up, right? So
yeah,
yeah. Um so yeah, anyway, but he then Lee or no, I'm sorry. Hiroshi apologizes to this nurse. And at this
yeah,
point I'm like, "Oh my god, that's Kentaro's mom,
yeah,
isn't it?" I'm like, "Oh my
yeah.
god," like that, yeah. So I thought that
I
was
think
brilliant.
I think you see her as the person in the hazmat suit who looks back at Lee in the very first like sequence in the thing.
Yeah,
But I kind of looked at it and thought, oh, that kind of looks like Kintaro's mom, but I don't think it is. And then when we
yeah,
got the sequence with them properly, I was like, oh my god, it is. That's how they're
yeah,
connecting it. And that's
yeah,
like a connection I didn't even want or think about, but it's just such a cool thing to make it feel further grounded.
yeah. Now I'm wondering where is the other side. I want to see the other side of the story now. Like I hope we get that too.
I
Um,
want to hit
but
you with an interesting question here,
okay.
right off the that, which is I think they have framed this very nicely to, if they do a second season, have more flashbacks, or perhaps even give us a film that explains something. Because what has happened between Operation Hourglass and Shaw coming back, that means that Monarch is at the point where they have this whole facility. Because the last thing we see with Monarch is them getting shut down. So is this off the back of the events of Kong Skull Island that we're now seeing it funded, and is this ultimately Bill Rander's legacy? Because it could be that we have Houston Brooks walking around at this point in time. We have the other scientist from Kong Skull Island, whose name I've forgotten. Because we know that they're in a Monarch facility in the post-credit scene of that film, right? So is this now their Monarch, where they're back up and fully operational? Is there something else that's happened here? I need to go away and look at the timelines now, because it's cool to think about the fact that this could be us seeing a fully operational Monarch again after evidence of Skull Island is established.
But what? Yeah, I don't know. What evidence do we have? Do we have the pictures and stuff from
You have pictures and stuff, and
Brie
you have
Larson?
so yeah. But Dr. Brooks also survives. Same with the other characters. So Brooks comes
Yeah, I
back in
forget the
with
ending.
the monsters. But Brooks survives and then goes back to work for Monarch. So at this point in time, Brooks is going to be kind of quite an influential person in Monarch, I would
Sure.
imagine.
So, but it's interesting though, because they do come away with evidence, right? So, but at the same time, in the beginning of the series, Bill is throwing his last resort evidence into the ocean. So, yeah, we do need to know a little bit about this time period, because now we got to restart over. We got to get the 80s and or 70s and
Yeah.
80s. We got to see how do we grow from those points. But yeah, I don't know, man. So I just thought that was brilliant, though, to get Kintaro's mom. And again, I didn't spend enough time with her to really realize, oh, that's a de-aged Kintaro's mom at first. But right until that moment when they started talking, I'm like, oh, of course, that's her. And then the next scene is we flash to the current timeline, and there she is. So they're making that parallel that you can confirm, that is her. And they return home. Kintaro and his mom return home, and they're basically talking about oh, you should get back to work and everything. And he's like, I can't. I'm too upset about Kate and May. And he's like, I wish I could help them. And how can he go back to the way things were? And they're just commiserating together. So, he's upset. And yeah, I don't know. It's I sympathize with him being thrust into this story that he had no idea was coming. He had no idea what was about to hit him, because he got blindsided by Kate showing up and walking into his house. And so, yeah, this poor guy, wet blanket guy, he's just like, I just lost a bunch of people that I didn't even know about 2 weeks ago, and now my life is completely changed. So
I think it's interesting when you think about it as well, because obviously he's not telling his mum what he's been through exactly in terms of the details of it.
yeah.
But can you imagine if he said more about it and she was like, oh, well, actually, there was this one time where I was working at a medical facility and this guy did come back. That would change the whole thing, because then he would
Yeah.
know that it's possible.
There is a lot unsaid, I think, in this moment. Yeah, that's definitely left unsaid. Also, there's no mention of Hiroshi at this point. He's not like, Dad is alive. He's out there. We need, we got, where is he? It's just let's settle down and let's go back to our
When
routine.
he comes
It's
back
not,
into
where is
this
Dad?
episode later is my favorite thing ever. It's just so out of nowhere.
I know. Yeah, I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, there's no mention of him, and it's not like I need to continue to find him and at least slap him in the face for all that's happened or something, nothing. He just there's no mention. But yeah, so that was interesting. But we do this is an interesting transition. This was a weird one at first, but we transitioned to Monarch's headquarters, and there's just this massive needle drop out of nowhere. I'm like, what is what is this show right now? Like, I don't
It's
know what
like
the song was,
slow-mo,
but
you can't hear the characters talking.
but just like I don't know, it was like a rap song or something like that. It was just
Yeah,
blasting, and I'm like, this feels out of normal for this show. What is going
yeah,
on here? And it turns out it's Barnes like listening to music,
yeah.
just in the headphones. But you know how they do that sometimes. But Barnes again, if Barnes is on screen, Barnes is going to be discovering something. So,
Yeah,
and it's basically the same thing every time. I feel like there's um, no arc to Barnes. It's just like this is Barnes' story. Ready?
yeah.
Oh my God! I just found a signal. That's it. That's her story over and over
Barnes
again.
is
I just found a
compliant
signal.
who knows everything.
Yeah. So we find out a little bit about the gamma bursts, that they're a signal, but like maybe it's a
I just
pattern
wanna
and maybe it's a
I was
message.
looking up context here. So can you
Oh, can't
see?
see.
Oh,
Nope.
I need to go that way.
Other way.
Oh
Other way.
no, yeah. Can you see when my notes say somebody
No.
is sending a message,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I
and
see that.
then there's just a must be and a name with an exclamation
I see
mark?
that. I see there is a name
Yeah,
there.
we'll come back to that.
I see at that point I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was just like I thought, "Oh my God, like
Just different wavelengths, Brad. There's a reason why I'm the one wearing the Monarch t-shirt.
I know. There really is. It's very stark and obvious at this point. But at this point, I'm thinking like, oh well, we didn't see Shaw and May doing any signal. We didn't. How are they sending the signal? I'm thinking about them, and I'm like, oh, there's no way I didn't see this. But we do cut to 1982 again, and Lee is back recovering, and Hiroshi's standing there, and this is where I need some more validation of as far as what's happening with Monarch, because Monarch doesn't really trust or Monarch doesn't trust Lee, but Hiroshi does, because he's like, "Hey, this is my uncle. Like, I know you. I know what's happening here." But um, at the same time, he doesn't trust him and he doesn't believe him. It's weird. Like, so during this conversation, though, there is a flashback to the 60s, 62, I guess.
Yeah,
And we see them following the Titan in very cool sequence. And there is like during this fall, you see the Titan flying ahead of them, and then you do see like mountains and stuff in the background. So there is kind of that visual style of what the Hollow Earth is. But it's just a split second, and they
it's
do
very
crash land. 3 people come out of the hourglass, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. I only see 3 people, and then they mention that the one guy didn't make it out. He didn't make it, but we see like them reconning the landing site. We see these really cool sequences of like frozen in time, like shots.
yeah.
It actually reminded me of the Jurassic World Evolution little cutscene things
Intro
that they have.
cinematic. Yeah,
They have these like frozen in time as the camera's kind of moving, and it was very cool. I thought it looked awesome. We get to see like a Titan attack, and then a rift is
the shot
opening.
of the shot of the female crew member with the lightning literally going through her. I was like,
Oh
oh
yeah,
my God.
so cool! Like just a great sequence, and it was like out of nowhere because we haven't gotten anything like that before in this show. So that
Yeah,
was like very different storytelling, and maybe a cost cutting measure. I don't know. They rendered one shot and then just slow mode it. There was no movement, but yeah, I thought that was really cool. And they mentioned that,
yeah,
or we do see Lee after that rift open. So he's literally only there for minutes, and
yeah.
and then he's back in 1982, and he's confused. And um, uh, Hiroshi mentions that we found them in the woods outside of Zumo, yeah, Higashizumo.
Yes.
And
There's a
this.
really cool thing here that. Oh,
Mhm.
go on.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was
I
going to
feel
say,
like I
I
know.
love how this connects it to folklore, because they were saying something about there being a location locally where people think it's the portal between the living and the dead, and then they reveal that it's actually the location of a portal to the Hollow Earth. I was like,
Yeah.
that's just such a cool way of tying this into folklore. And that's what I really love is when fantastical franchises do this. So something that does that really well is the SCP franchise, where like you have all these mythical stories and it's like, oh, these things could actually be an anomaly rather than just myth. And that's something that this franchise does so well with the Titans, because you think, okay,
Mhm.
maybe like these ancient stories are actually about a Titan, but to
Yeah.
then tie the portals into that mythology as well is so awesome.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of visuals as far as like what could have been part of the past or part of a society of people that worshipped these monsters. We get that underground water cavern in Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Yes.
There's a full society of built places, and then in
It
this
only dawned on me the other day, like, I think we spoke about this on an earlier
mm,
show, but I only really realized recently that that is the Hollow Earth as well. That's just the underwater portion of it.
yeah, and that's like that's what this sounds like to me, because they mention, it was inside of a shrine with a rift and
Yeah,
there was a lot of mythography, and I'm thinking about, yeah, exactly what you were just talking about, that we've seen so many images in title sequences or credit sequences of like ancient cave kind of drawings and different architecture and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe this could have been a super super old place that was discovered that people have used to worship over time. But yeah, I thought that was really cool. It was kind of glossed over, but so I'd like to learn more, because as far as we saw, he was just standing in the middle of the woods,
yeah,
and it kind of just looked like the upside down, like it kind of just looked
yeah.
like that portion, but just so he left
Brad, I
from
didn't want
Kansas.
to break to you. You just called it the Upside Down, just to
I
let
know,
you
I
know.
know, I know, I know, I know, I know. Oh, that was purposeful. Um, uh, because it was the parallel between, like, this is the top version and the bottom version. They looked
Yeah,
almost similar to me. Um, so yeah, I just thought that was interesting. We don't actually see this shrine. We just see him
yeah.
standing in the woods.
I think
And
there's a really interesting connection here to Kong Skull Island as well with the Iwi people and the idea that actually these ancient tribes were potentially more aware of this than we are in the modern day, because this is something you see all the time, right? In a lot of
yeah,
different things, people always speculate, oh, did ancient tribes actually know more about certain things than we know now? And I think there's this really interesting way that they're layering that into this show with actually saying, look, this has been part of mythology for so long, but we've essentially like forgotten it over time, but it's always been there.
hmm yeah. Yeah, I have been thinking about that, because when watching Godzilla versus Kong, we see, I forget what her name is, that little girl who's like
Yeah, the last of the
the
tribe.
the the only one left over, and
Yeah,
I've been thinking about her connecting to these ancient civilizations and stuff, and I was like,
yeah,
yeah, dude, I rewatched the trailer for the new movie, and I didn't realize at the time that like three people are returning, and I was like, oh, that's very
yeah.
cool. Like I didn't realize that the little girl, is one of them. Um, so that was cool, but
Podcast
the
dude.
podcast dude, the scientist lady, yeah. So there's a lot of and it was making me think about this show too, and I will get to that in a little bit. But
Yeah,
so uh, this is an interesting point as well. This is the He's just continuing in this full scene, but like Hiroshi, mentions that he thought his father was crazy,
yeah,
and not as right, as Lee thinks he is, and so there's like still like after everything that even Hiroshi has seen, he still doesn't believe any of this, and
yeah,
I'm wondering, does he work at Monarch at this point? Like, I wasn't even sure if he did.
yeah, he does.
He does? Okay, because
He's the
like,
one who says it's a Monarch medical facility.
yeah, but like, I don't, maybe he just showed up. Maybe he got word that his uncle was back and he just popped in,
Mm.
because I didn't,
But
because of the way he believes at this point
yeah,
makes me think like, you know, makes me question, what in the world is Monarch even a thing for if he has no belief of any of this stuff?
yeah,
So that's why I'm wondering, is he actually part of Monarch at this point, or
yeah.
is this the step that connects him to Monarch? I don't know, because
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw. I think he's already working for Monarch at this point, but I'm gonna throw something at you that I think will make this make sense.
Okay.
Which is, of course, he's gonna be angry with Bill, and he's not gonna want to believe that he's right because Bill has just died on Skull Island trying to prove that these things exist. So Hiroshi is grieving, and he's also angry at this point in time that actually the third and final parental figure he had in his life has once again left him and hasn't come back. So in a way, he's taking that anger out on Shaw.
Yeah, no, definitely. I see that as well. I mean, he literally says he lost like the three people that
Yeah,
meant anything to him there. Um and well, he didn't really. He still has a few. He only
yeah,
really lost one. So yeah, but that was a good scene. I thought it was interesting, but I just I need a again, I need to figure out what's going on at this point in time. And
yeah,
if he is part of Monarch at this point, like why does he not believe? Why does he think,
yeah.
this Hollow Earth and the Titans and all this is crazy and I don't know. So hopefully we get some connections there. But I did like that, at this point, 1982, he's like, hey, look, we're gonna move you out. They're gonna move you out to a retirement facility, a secure location. Um, and he blames all of this. He's like, for 300,000 years, like people have coexisted
Mm.
and not caused any issue. But then you three come along, and now this is the world that we live in. So I thought that was pretty cool. And he did say like some beasts are best left undisturbed. It was a very cool line. But yeah, I thought you know he's upset. He's mentioning that we just need to leave this in the past. We don't need to deal with this at all. Like you said, some beasts are best left undisturbed, and he's blaming everything on them. So he doesn't seem to me like, I don't know. I'm not sure how connected he is, but then we do get to see Lee being kept docile in retirement.
I'm really uh, again, you're making me curious because you would have seen my face flash white there for a
I
second.
did, yeah.
Um, I've opened up the Godzilla Wikipedia just because I'm really curious. Because, like I was saying earlier, Brooks is around at this point in time, and that's somebody who's been on Skull Island. He's seen the cave paintings. He knows that Kong exists as well. He knows that the skull crawlers are coming out of a portal. And Brooks would still be a monarch at this point of time because he does retire briefly, but it's not until 2012. So in the 1980s. Oh, interesting. So there's a bit of lore about Brooks. Um, Let me just skim through this. So it says in the 1980s, Houston is approached by Landsat technician Rick Stanton. So Stanton is the doctor with glasses from King of the Monsters. After Stanton grew curious concerning company whispers of the covered up Skull Island mission. So Monarch also covered up Skull Island, which perhaps explains why Hiroshi is so unsure because we're sat here saying as an audience, obviously as an audience, Skull Island has happened at this point. There's evidence out there that's irrefutable. So why is Hiroshi still thinking this? But just
Yeah.
reading that, and I'll dig into it more a little bit later, it seems as if Monarch covered up a lot of the Skull Island mission as well, which makes sense because obviously Landsat were involved in that. You had the Air Cavalry Battalion involved in that who weren't a part of Monarch. So it's interesting to think, okay, has that cover up again got to the point where it's as shady as some of the stuff that we've seen in this show that even people within Monarch don't know that it happened, and therefore the credibility that would be there to substantiate these theories isn't well known enough within the organization itself to let people take them forward.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was questioning before, when we were talking about all the photography you had gotten out from Skull Island and
Yeah,
but at the same time, it was so dire to get that one little bag of information with the data, out, from Bill. So yeah, I don't know. Like it just feels like everything's a cover up, and maybe they're just there to protect these locations and not really do anything about them. And like
Yeah,
like Hiroshi's saying, it's like we just need to let it be and not deal with any of this, because that's the way it was, for 300,000 years, and everything was fine. So maybe that's Monarch's legacy at this point, is just we just need to be the protectors. You always see that in a movie, there's always like, if there's some ancient thing, there's like some society that protects it and keeps it shut off from the world. Maybe that's all they are at this point, instead of, finding a way
yeah.
to stop or anything like that. So maybe,
I think
but
they've potentially planted seeds for them to tell more interesting story anyway.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
like we spoke about in earlier episodes, if Apex or what they were before, Applied Technologies, has been more involved in Monarch, I think stories like this love to have a theme where there's some internal force preventing information from being shared. So I could easily see them saying, well, actually, look, these people had access to Monarch, but in the process of having access to Monarch, they were actually hiding X, Y, and Z, and that's why this didn't happen.
yeah, yeah, I believe it. Um, and I loved here. We're gonna cut to like a transition of time.
Yeah,
Uh, Leah's still on the couch and
yeah,
watching TV. He's being medicated and all that. But I loved this moment. This is the early days of the MCU for me. This is like
yeah,
what was so brilliant about, I forget how it all played out, but we would see like on a computer screen, you would see the Hulk attack, and you would see
yeah,
this thing here and there, and everything would be, kind of crossing over. And I love that Lee is just sitting there watching Godzilla versus the Muto on TV, and I thought that was really, really cool. Just a great moment. And you see he comes back to life in that moment, and he crushes his medication. So he is there for like a year, right? So
a
he's
long
there for still no, but I mean, like, even once this attack happens, he sees this attack, he's still there for like an extra year
time there,
before
yeah.
is able to escape with the kids. Um, but yeah, I
But
thought that
that's
was
the
pretty cool.
it's interesting, isn't it, in that regard, that Monarch don't come to him to try and get him to help in any regard, or actually, so we know that he had escape attempts. So is this the point in time where those escape attempts started?
Yeah,
Because
it
he
could
feels
be.
of this,
Yeah.
it would make sense because up until that point he seems to be, like you say, quite medicated. But
Yeah.
then, if this is what triggers him to try and escape, that maybe explains why. Because he knows that obviously Bill was right, and nobody else is believing it, but he knows that that's connected to Godzilla. So that would make a lot of sense, and actually that answers the question as to why he tried to escape in the first place.
Yeah.
One thing that I did really appreciate here, and I want to go back and watch Godzilla to double check, but I think the footage we got of Godzilla and the Muto was entirely new, which is
Hmm.
really cool to just get that new angle of the fight that we haven't seen before. Because that's what, like, to go to your point, the thing I always used to love was in shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., for example, where you get the behind the scenes, every now and then you get a clip of something from a different angle or from a different perspective. And I just think that's so cool. And again, helping you to get this grounded sense of the world, because you get this sense that actually there's other things happening around it. In this instance, there's somebody across the water in Honolulu who's still filming that battle, which is just so awesome to think about. And it's like small details like that I think take it from a film to a cinematic universe in terms of making it feel grounded and lived in and real.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that stuff so much. And yeah, maybe this facility is just like we were saying, the way that Monarch is now, maybe is just keeping everything under wraps, and everybody that knows anything about monsters is just getting thrown into facilities like this all around the world, and shut up, and nobody can hear from them ever again. So yeah, it just sounds to me like maybe we're uncovering this as we go along, but Monarch is just a cover up company at this point, maybe.
Yeah.
But um, but we are back in the Hollow Earth, and Lee basically everything we just saw basically was like Lee retelling it to May. They
Yeah.
continue looking for Kate, and then we cut to the current time again in on the surface of Earth, and
Oh,
Kentaros
dude.
and his what what
And I just wanna I'm just looking over my notes now, flip over to where we are currently, but there's one line that I'd written down from, Hiroshi and Lee when they're talking that
oh okay
absolutely destroyed me, and that line was, "I buried that family in 3 empty boxes long ago."
oh yeah dude that was a rough one
Yeah,
yeah because he didn't have anybody come back to him ever like
yeah,
that's brutal. And then his answer for that is, "I need 2 families."
yeah. Okay, so you were jumping forward to then Kentaro at his
Yeah,
office.
he's in
Uh,
the office, and then out of nowhere, just walking through the door, no not even
yeah,
ceremoniously or anything, he just walks, he's like, "Hey, what's up? Hiroshi's
yeah.
here." And Kentaro's just like,
I
I was
love
just
how
about to
Kintaro
leave."
is literally like, "What the hell? Are you not even gonna acknowledge anything that's happened?" And, like, you can tell that Hiroshi just doesn't think he needs to whatsoever.
Mhm. Yeah, he obviously has a lot to explain, and he's like, "Hey, you were never supposed to know about Kate." Like, "Oh, okay, man. Like,
Yeah.
thanks for that information. Really didn't."
Literally saying the quiet part of cheating in any
Yeah,
relationship out loud.
just not being a good guy whatsoever. He's but at this point, it's like we get to see a little bit of humanity again, and Kentaro
Yeah.
tells him that, "Look, Kate's dead, dude. Like, this is all your fault."
Dude, the
And,
way
and
he acted that, the way that
oh my
Hiroshi
god.
played that was gut-wrenching.
Yeah, it was beautiful acting. Yeah, absolutely. He hasn't gotten to do a lot in this show,
Yeah.
but that moment in time was well worth it because we get to see him just completely break down. He doesn't want to believe it, but
Yeah.
he breaks down. He's crying. You know he's completely broken at this point, and Kentaro's like yelling at him like, "This is all your fault. You did this. This is all on you, dude." Like
Dude,
so.
this is where I said there's a character line that's not written very well, and it's the line that he says to Hiroshi, because he said, and I wrote it down, he says, "Kate never would have come barging into my life." So he's still making it about him and his life, and I just think that Kentaro is past that at this point in time. So that line really stood out to me as him being back to that episode 1, "Oh, why have you got to come here and mess things up?" And I
Mhm.
don't think that's who this character is anymore. So I just didn't feel like that was phrased particularly well for Kentaro.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a tough
I just thought he was
situation.
kicking a man while he's down as well. Like, geez.
Dude, I actually like when Hiroshi like breaks down and falls on the ground, I have
Yeah.
expected Kentaro to be like throwing a few kicks in there for real.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how could you do this? Like you've legitimately ruined my life. Like everything is broken. And I could like kind of see him just being like, boom, kick, I'm out of here, leaving him on the
Yeah.
ground. But he didn't. He
I
just
see.
was,
I
yelling at him.
find that really interesting because it sets like characters on interesting different paths, right? Because you have Kate, who everything we've made, despite that, she still found compassion for her. And she was still able to look past it and be nice to her. And then you have Kentaro, who, when he's encountered with his dad in a moment of genuine vulnerability,
Yeah.
yes, he's done a lot to wrong him, but still, this man is clearly hurting. Kentaro is just a massive dick. Like, he just absolutely drives the knife in while he's down, and he's like, "Yeah, she's dead because of you." I was like, "Oh my god."
Yeah. Yeah, he stabbed him. He's got some fresh wounds. It's basically, they're both heartbroken and he's not going to let it go. So I
Yeah,
can't blame him. I can't blame him because he's been through so much. Um, but yeah, his
yeah,
uh, Hiroshi acted the hell out of that scene. It was a great scene. So, and we do cut to the last sequence here, which we're back on the Hollow Earth and we see Kate
yeah,
awaken, and we get this. massive like Titan warthog thing with thorns in its back and vines and it
Yeah.
was crazy. Look, what a great design. It basically sniffs her and then it's like and walks away. It gets out of there and but it comes back around and I'm getting vibes of like what you
I
can't do my
didn't
warthog
I
sounds.
didn't have you doing a hog impression on my 2024 bingo card, I'm
Yeah,
not
there you
gonna
go.
lie.
I wanted to get it out of the way real early on. I didn't want to make you wait until like, October or anything. Um, but this was giving me vibes of like Claire Deering in the Biosyn forest while the
Yeah,
Therizinosaurus is around. It was kind of
yeah,
because like Kate's crawling on the ground and it was a very dark sequence and
yeah.
again that beautiful lighting in this upside down area.
Ooh,
Uh
but before we come to how this sequence ends, I do think the creature designers on this show deserve a massive, massive shout out because
oh
what
yeah.
they did with the design of this hog is they made it so similar to the ram that you see in the swamp in Kong Skull Island. Like visually, it's so similar to that in terms of having
Okay.
all of these plants and things on its
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
What this kind of inadvertently confirms, I think, is that all of the fauna that you see on Skull Island has come through from the Hollow Earth, or it's come through from Axis Mundi if this ends up being a separate area, which I
Yeah.
think is really cool because it just kind of adds more credibility to the idea of actually, you've got these portals across the earth that Monarch are tracking, and that maybe ancient civilizations have been involved in as well. But what happens when you have this portal on a remote island that is just completely inaccessible for years?
Mhm.
Actually, all of the life from this other world starts dripping in and developing on our world as well. And I think that's just such a cool microcosm for explaining Skull Island and what Skull Island is within this universe.
Well, I mean, that's even been explained kind of already with Godzilla versus no, the Godzilla King of the Monsters. That was
Yeah,
part of the reason of them wanting to let the Titans roam the Earth. And at the end of the
yeah,
movie, we do even get to see like I think it might have happened earlier, but like there was a little video sequence where like they show the overgrowth of San Francisco, which we
yeah,
do see in this show, and we see it like play out in real time. But like you get to see all that overgrowth. It's bringing life back to the earth, and then in I think towards the end of that movie, we get to see like the medical advancements, things like that are occurring because of these titans.
yeah.
So yeah, they're bringing all kinds of flourishes to the surface, and I think that's really cool. And yeah, the design is just so killer. I this was another sequence where I was like, this happened multiple times out throughout this episode where I just was looking at this show and wondering why in the world is there not a Jurassic Park TV show? I'm like, this
Yeah.
if you can do this, if you can create some massive warthog monster thing, why is there not a Jurassic TV
Well,
show?
I think what this show shows as well, right, is that actually you don't need to have the monsters all the time for it to feel meaningful. Because I
No.
think that's like Jurassic with dinosaurs, you don't have the dinosaurs all the time anyway. So you kind of like have an easier ride, right? With the Monsterverse, the whole premise is about titans. So people come into it expecting these massive scale animals, and if you're able to tell a story successfully without them in it a lot of the time, that's a huge achievement. The Monsterverse, I've always said this, it's harder to do a television story in the Monsterverse than it is Jurassic. Jurassic has got it so much easier in a way, and yet we have the Monsterverse here paving the way and showing us what Jurassic should be doing. That just blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very sad. And I think maybe, a lot of people would definitely say that's where Jurassic lost its way, right? By
Yeah,
focusing on the dinosaurs, maybe a little bit too much, because instead of being a story about dinosaurs, it's a story of dinosaurs and
yeah.
what they're doing. Um, and this
But
is
I
a
will
show
say,
about the monsters, but not necessarily just a story of the monsters and what they're
yeah.
doing. So, yeah.
I do think it's a very fine balance because I think in the same way this has hit the right balance in terms of um what's it, sort of like parallel storytelling with events that we understand and meaningful inclusion of the Titans. I think with Jurassic, if you were to do something like Hammond, where it's just this period of time before the dinosaurs, that's never going to work, because then it's just character drama within that universe. It's how you get the balance right that is so critical, and I think that's what this show has done really, really well.
Well,
And I
it
think,
shows that it could happen. We could get a show about Hammond
yeah,
where it shows the boring stuff, boring in quotes, like the stuff that
yeah,
people would tune out for. It's the stuff that happens in the past, the organization of InGen and his company
yeah,
and the research and gathering funds or whatever. But it also shows the future and what is
yeah.
occurring and what's happening. This show
This
is the template. It's exactly what should happen.
this is where I think it says that Hammond as a concept wouldn't work, though, because it has to be concurrent with something else, right? And
Mhm.
we already know that
We already did
Jurassic
it.
World happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We've already seen what that future is, so
Yeah.
there's no real storytelling potential there. Now, you could do something concurrent with the end of Jurassic World Dominion and give us an expansion on Biosyn, and then show what the fallout of that is. That could potentially work well.
Yeah.
But it's how you do it in a meaningful way. And
Sure.
one thing that this show does do in a meaningful way that I predicted last episode, and I wanna put that on the record, is it easily gives us a way to explain how any character lost through one of these portals could have survived.
Yep. Yep. So we
Any
get that we get
mistake.
that warthog coming back around and boom, gets hit with an arrow. And I'm like, "Whoa, an
Yeah.
arrow." In my mind, I'm like, "Dang, like Lee just made an arrow real quick. How did
Yeah.
he do that?" My mind was not there, man.
Wait,
I was
wait,
not thinking
your mind was still like, "Oh, this
still
is Liam."
still elsewhere, dude. I'm still thinking of other stuff completely. I blanked completely on the fact that Keiko could be there.
This is where
Um,
Mike, Kentaro, and Kate going on their different journeys. Me and you have gone on different
yep.
journeys.
Yep, Keiko appears, and I'm like, I legitimately sat up and I was like, yes, Keiko's
Yeah.
back. Like, oh my god, that is so cool.
Dude,
Just
do you want to know the first
oh,
thing I
so
thought?
cool. What?
First thing I thought was, Shaw has really lucked out here because his old crush is still alive and she hasn't aged a day.
But you know what what happens? Bad things happen when when Keiko's around and he's trying to, it's
Yeah.
never been good for Monarch when he tries to do anything for this relationship. So, but I can fully visualize the meetup of the four of them in real time in the Hollow Earth or the Upside Down, whatever we
Yeah.
want to call it these days. Um, I can't wait for it. I hope it happens, and I don't know. I hope everybody makes it out okay, but I've got a bad feeling like not everybody's going to make it out of this
So
next
I
episode.
think the ultimate what I'm calling it, okay? And again,
Okay,
this is
take a
nothing that
shot.
we've seen in trailers, but I think Shaw's gonna die. Because I think
Hmm.
that the whole thread of this has been his character arc is motivated by feeling bad that he lost her. So what is the ultimate end to his story rather than being the reason that she survives and gets back?
It's the ultimate sacrifice for him. So
Yeah.
that's what I think too. I think first off, you've got Kurt Russell. I mean, like his paycheck has got to be kind of big.
Yeah.
So we got
Don't
Kurt
run him
Russell in
more
the
than one
show.
season.
Yeah, let's cut ties. Let's get him out of here, and we can keep his son around for the past or something. We can still do some stories with or not his son. Yeah, yeah. Well, him
Yeah.
himself in the past. But yeah, we could cut ties with him, and that's kind of what I'm thinking too. It would be interesting to see and sad, but like it would be a
Yeah.
full circle kind of moment. But yeah, I cannot wait. I think this is a brilliant story, and I just and so during this episode, I was thinking about Lee coming
Yeah.
back, and we've talked about this for obviously weeks now, and you had mentioned it first off that like yeah, I think he was in the Hollow Earth, and that's why he hasn't aged and everything. So
Yeah.
he hit a rift right away and went 20 years in the future.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean for the characters that are there now? I mean, we know from Godzilla versus Kong that those characters can, get into heaves and just go back and forth,
Yeah.
no problem. No problem. And
Do you,
Kong can run up through the portal and climb up and be totally fine. Everything's cool. It's no
yeah.
time change at all. So what is the difference? Why did Lee, miss 20 years? So what does that mean for these people? And I was like, dude, I don't think it's going to happen, but how cool would it be if they popped up like in the world of Godzilla X Kong, like
Well, dude,
10 years later?
you've potentially blown my mind here in a way. I don't think they're going to do it because of the image that is the image for episode 10 on Apple TV, and I'll talk about
Ah,
that right at the end. But can you imagine, right? So they say that somebody's sending signals. That's clearly Keiko. That it's got to be Keiko that's sending signals to try and get herself rescued. Can you imagine if we end this season with them still trapped in the Hollow Earth and Monarch have to work with Apex to figure out how to get them out?
yeah, I think
That
that's
would be
great.
such a cool connection, and it then perfectly feeds into GVK with why they have that technology, because they've had to work together to launch a rescue mission.
Yeah,
But also,
yeah.
equally, we don't actually know. We do see how Shaw gets back, or do we? It's kind of left up in the air, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, no, we
No,
don't
we
see how
do.
he gets back.
He gets sucked through when the Iron
Oh,
Dragon
yeah,
goes
yeah, yeah.
portal.
That's
No,
true,
yeah,
that's
we
true.
did do that. So, well, yeah, I mean, I'll talk in a minute when we talk episode 10.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's the end of episode 9, so episode
Okay,
10.
so let's
What
talk episode 10. So
What's it
the
called?
thing to note right off the bat, I'll do that in a second.
Okay,
But
alright, you got your thing, you go.
the image for episode 10 is the Iron Dragon. So
Ooh,
it's just that in the sky. So presumably that Titan is going to be their way back, which kind of gives us an answer in a way of how they're going to get back, I
okay.
think.
Okay,
Um,
so I
but
could definitely see at that point, like, Lee being like the stupid trope that I hate that every movie series ever does is like "I'll distract it, you go," and, something like that. I could definitely see that
I
coming.
am just going to say to you at this point, I absolutely respect how much you have been off the internet, because a lot of season 10, a lot of season 10, a lot of episode 10 has
Wow.
been shown in the trailers, and I'm not
I
going
was
to
just in the
talk
Hollow
about
Earth for 9 seasons. I don't know what
yeah,
happened.
yeah. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to
Okay.
spoil it. But a lot of that episode has been shown in the trailers, so I
Oh, okay.
really respect that you don't know that.
I don't
And
know. I haven't seen any further trailers pop up for this
honestly,
show.
I
Like,
got so into
nothing.
this show that anytime Apple posts something, I watch it, and
I'm
then
not
I'm
even off
instantly
the
like,
internet. I'm
why
on the
have I
internet.
watched that? um,
Yeah. Alright, so
yeah,
don't watch the trailers. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna stick
so
with that for now on.
episode 10 is Beyond Logic, which is such an awesome title for the season finale, given that beyond logic lies the truth. Um, and it says the team struggles to find a way out of Axis Mundi. Kentaro and Tim make an unexpected alliance. So
Okay.
Kentaro and Tim, right off the bat, I'm going to make another prediction here. They're working behind Verdugo's back with Devil. I'm calling it that they're going to be back together, because like
Okay.
you have that little moment where she pulls him out, where like she grabs his hand to make sure he's okay, and he looks at her, and I'm like, they're the dynamic duo. There's no way they're not ending this series on good terms.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think they'll be working together. I think the interesting thing is going to be seeing how this wraps the story up and understanding what Hiroshi was trying to do, because he says that what he was doing went wrong in the desert. So what was he
Yeah.
trying
But
to do, and why?
yeah. I don't know, man. We
Did, did
there's
he
a
detect the signals? Like, does Hiroshi know that his grandmother's alive, and was he trying to rescue her?
not even his grandmother, just his mom.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. uh I don't know, man. Yeah, that's a good point. He maybe he uncovered the signals early. Yeah, that would be cool. I don't know
Because
if we
that
have any
would make
precedent for
sense,
that, but
wouldn't it? 'Cause that machine we know calls the Titans. We know that it's used in this episode as the bait to get into the Hollow Earth. So what if he's trying to use it to get her out? It makes sense. That seems like a natural way of concluding the story. And actually, we know that obviously he has got the technology to summon the Titans, but he doesn't have a way into the portals. So if he was working with Tim and Duvall, they're going to be able to get him access to one of the portal sites.
Yeah.
Seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
If I've just got that right, I am retiring from podcasting, and I'm going to go and chat to Apple about season 2.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, I could definitely see like a 1982 sequence of, Shaw's back at the retirement facility, and Hiroshi's going over some documents or something, and
Yeah.
I could see it dawn on him that, like, wait a minute. If he made it out, maybe she could have too, and maybe she could too. Maybe she's still down there. I could definitely see like a scene where it dawns on him that she could still be alive, and that you're right, like this is him trying to figure it all out. That definitely seems like it's the right answer for that question.
What can I say? I'm just far too into this show, and it shows that while
Again,
I'm
who is your source?
I just think this shows, right, that when you're not working full time, you can get so invested into television that you can just work out what happens. So
I guess
clearly,
so.
I just need to never work again.
That's fine. That's fine, man. Keep doing what you're doing. It's working. It's working for you. But yeah. So, any final predictions before you head out of this one?
I think my only other prediction, because I want it to be true, is I think they're gonna say that this show has been so successful that we're gonna get a second season.
Oh yeah, I think so too. I think yeah, but at the same time, I was thinking about it the other day. We've been at this for 10 years. Like this is a 10-year project since 2014. So like at what point does it end? I'm sad. I mean, Godzilla obviously and Kong, they're both properties that are forever properties. They're never going to go away. But this universe, when does it does it decide to call it quits ever? Does it decide, we're done? Or, is it like a television show where it just says like, 5 seasons and we're done? Or is it like Marvel that is still going, 10 plus years? So what's it going to be? I don't know. I hope it keeps going.
Really, yeah, they have the advantage of not overdoing it. So Marvel, I was saying this the other day to somebody because I watched Ant-Man Quantumania. I watched
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
And I watched Wakanda Forever, and I didn't have a massive issue with any of those films really. Like Quantumania, definitely some of it is what were they doing, but I think that so much of the poor reception to those films is just fatigue because the MCU has been throwing so much at us for so long. I think the advantage that the Monsterverse has got is they haven't upped to the pace. So they haven't made the Marvel mistake of going, okay, let's do 2 films every year. Let's do X amount of TV shows. They're taking their time. So actually, while it's maintaining this quality, I'm all for this going as long as they want it to, because I think if they can continue to tell compelling stories, why wouldn't they? And actually, I feel like this has opened up a whole other interesting story that they could explore, which is we've got Monarch Legacy of Monsters. Couldn't we get Monarch the Legacy of Skull Island and do like a parallel story telling us some of the Iwi tribe in the past and then showing us the Iwi tribe in the future? Because what this whole thing has got me thinking now, Brad, is obviously we know that girl is the last girl on the island, and I don't think it ever really gets explained as to how that's happened and where they've all gone. Couldn't they just be living in the Hollow Earth now?
They could, yeah. I mean, they do say something along the lines of they got wiped out by the storm or something, right? Like I think something along those lines. But yeah, they could have just disappeared into the interiors or something. So and left her behind for some reason by mistake.
Like so much story that they could still tell with all of these different things.
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree. I am worried though because like Godzilla -1 was so excellent, and if Godzilla X Kong is not which it won't be. It won't. It's not going to
Well, the
be Godzilla minus
conversation
one.
online has already been incredibly divisive, hasn't it? Sadly.
Sure, yeah. It's not. It's not going to reach those levels. I feel like I'm pretty confident in saying that. Like Godzilla minus one was like a 5 out of 5. Like it was like an incredible movie. Probably the best Godzilla movie there ever is. So,
Watching it yesterday, but there were no showings.
come on, man.
Yeah.
Go find it. But but yeah, and if it doesn't even reach those levels, like, will people be, and the box offices are so unknown at this point. It could be $1 billion. It could be 147 million. It could be
Well, yeah, look
nothing.
at the performance of Mission Impossible.
Yeah, and I'm of the opinion that movie wasn't very good, but I do think it should have absolutely made more money than it did. Same thing with the Marvels and Indiana Jones and all these. They should have made more money. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But fatigue, maybe, yeah, definitely, I guess, plays a role into it. But I mean, I'm not fatigued in any of this stuff. I'll watch all of the Marvel, all of the Godzillas, all the dinosaurs. I'll watch all of the things. Okay, so it doesn't bother me at all. But I know I'm not general audience.
Just separate thought completely from this for a second, but just a seed I want to plant in your brain. I was thinking the other day, and I feel like this might have even been a conversation we had actually, so maybe you planted this seed in my brain, but I was like, do you know what? Marvel needs more R-rated stuff. It needs more mature stuff.
Well,
why not give us a mature version of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Oh, that would be interesting. That would be cool. I was gonna say, if you want some more mature stuff, just wait 5 days, and I think you'll be set, or so, or however many, 4 or 5 days.
I'm gonna pitch something to you once we're done recording. I had an idea the other day.
I have been over yesterday. I decided, hey, maybe I should catch up on Daredevil again and rewatch Daredevil. And that show is just of a completely. It feels just such of a different era. And I know it was obviously story told via different, outlet. It was not the typical Marvel train, with the movies and stuff. So it was a very different circumstance, but it just feels so different and grounded and very different. So I'm very excited though for Echo in a few days. So can't wait for that.
I think it'll be cool. I hope they stick the landing with it.
I hope so. So, Agent T, where can everybody find you online?
If you come to Monarch Outpost 67, no, you can find me at Tom_Jurassic on Twitter and Instagram. And I will say on Twitter, I always put a tweet out about my thoughts on the episode, so look out for that.
Awesome.
And I am never going to call it X, no matter how people might want me to.
That would be terrible to say. I wouldn't want to hear that. I'm not going to be there. I'm not on X, but I'm on Threads. Just search for me there. I'm on Letterboxd, writing some reviews. So go, if you want to see my thoughts on some of these things. I don't know. I think this show is on there, but probably not officially. Like, Letterboxd has mostly just movies, and every now and then, if there's like a TV show that has like one series or something like that, it'll be on there. But usually not TV shows per se. But
Letterboxd review for The Ones Who Live.
Soon, dude. February 25th, right? Like,
and
I cannot wait.
Pay release.
What do you? Oh my god. Sorry about that, man. I'll tell you how it was though.
Thanks.
And I feel like in my heart that I'm gonna be like, hey, man. Sorry to say, it kind of stinks. I'm so afraid to have to say that.
Dude, did you not see the budget? They spent $5 million an episode.
Okay. All right. I mean, that's pretty decent.
That's just Andy and Denai's
it could be. Maybe, yeah. Who knows? I'm excited for it though. I just have zero hopes for it to be any good. But Daryl Dixon was good. I really liked that show. I thought that was awesome. Excellent. But that also was a France production team out in Paris or wherever. Like, it just looked different. It felt different. Had real, French actors. Like, it just looked and sounded great. So I don't know. I don't have hopes for The Ones Who Live. So we'll see. But you can find my reviews on Letterboxd and wherever else, TikTok, all that good stuff. And the podcast, please go listen to the podcast. We are out on, let's see, where's the card? Here it is. Wherever those places are: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, Amazon Music, places like that. And you can find the podcast as well on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. We are on there. I feel like I've trashed on Facebook so much, but I'm starting to feel like it's once X, Twitter, just became what it is. I'm like, maybe Facebook ain't so bad anymore.
Yeah.
So we'll see if we get back into that a little bit. But thank you everybody for watching. It's been fun. I really love this show, and I can't wait for episode 10. It's gonna be wild.
I am gonna be upset when it's gone.
Me too, dude. Well, me too. I won't get to talk to you anymore. That's it. That's the last time I'm talking to you. I can't believe it. So anyway, thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye.